Good afternoon, everyone, and thank you very much for joining the biggest virtual and migration and education session Conclave 2021 presented by Aussizz Group. This session is about employer-sponsored visa, and the session is conducted by Mr. Prince Pahal. We will be taking questions at the end of the session, so you can drop your questions in the chat room and we'll read it out in the end of the session. Due to the time restriction, we'll be able to take only limited number of questions, but if your questions are unanswered during this session, then don't worry. We will be conducting a Q&A session from 5 p.m. to 6 p.m., which is Melbourne time today. Our experts will be waiting to take your questions. I have provided, sorry, it's 5:30 to 6 p.m. I have provided the link for you. I've just dropped it in the message. So that is the link to join the Q&A session, which is happening today at 5:30 until 6 p.m. Melbourne time. Now I would like to take this opportunity to introduce today's speaker, Mr. Prince Pahal. Prince Pahal is our principal migration agent at Aussizz Group Brisbane office, and he has extensive knowledge and in-depth experience for employer-sponsored visa, skilled nominated visa, and family visa. He has been working in the industry for more than 8 years and successfully assisted thousands of individual clients. Prince's secret weapon is his family and warm nature. He earnestly listens to his clients and always delivers outstanding results. No wonder he is one of the most popular and trusted migration agent in Australia. Now, I would like to hand over to Prince Pahal to continue the presentation. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you so much for the beautiful introduction, Anna. I appreciate that. And hello to all the guests who are joined this session regarding employer-sponsored visa. I hope that you get some valuable information out of this session today. And hopefully somehow, somewhere, the information you're going to get today, will help you out to, seek your next step in your career onwards. So let's start off with the employer-sponsored visa. Obviously, there are different categories. As Anna mentioned, myself, Prince Pahal, I'm a migration agent at Aussizz Group Brisbane branch, and we will be discussing about employer-sponsored visas today. So, as you all know, there are a few different categories that comes under employer-sponsored visa. The first category I consider, which is training visa, 407 visa. The second one is 482 visa, which is temporary skills shortage visa. The third one is 186 visa, which is employer nomination scheme. And the fourth one is 494, which is skilled employer regional scheme visa. So these four categories are under employer-sponsored visa. Now, every category have got their different criteria to be satisfied if you were to lodge the application. Some of these visas leads to permanent residency. Some of these visa is a pathway towards permanent residency. So depending which visa you apply for, there's a pathway towards permanent residency. So let's, I'm going to give you a common criteria, first of all, as you can see on the slide, like what's the common criteria for all these visas to be applied for. Different visa category, different requirement, which we will go in detail into our upcoming slides. But few of the common criteria for all these visas are, you must need an employer to sponsor you. So obviously, as the name sounds, employer-sponsored visa, so you need an employer to sponsor you. You cannot apply this visa independently, like the way you do in general skill migration, like 189 or 190. For all these visa categories, 407, 482, 186, 494, you need an employer to sponsor you. The sponsor or the employer must have been operating the business lawfully in Australia. So obviously the business must be operating. So you can't you can't just sponsor someone if you have a plan to open the business in the next 6 months or something. So the business must have been operating lawfully in Australia. Some of the startup businesses can also apply for the sponsorship. If you have someone who's recently started the business and they want to sponsor you, still there is a way how it can be done. But in that particular application, we have to prepare a business plan, how the business will grow in the future. So, but basically, in short, the business must have been operating lawfully in Australia. That's the main thing. Now, once the sponsor sponsors you for the visa application, and assuming that your visa gets granted, the sponsor or the employer has the obligation to meet as per Department of Home Affairs. Yeah, thanks for the question, Lillian. But like I said, we will be taking questions. But there's a lot to cover, and as I mentioned earlier in this session, Everybody have got their own particular question, which I'm happy to take in, but let me go through the slides. Let me give a generic information to all of you, and then I'll take those questions. As I mentioned just now, that the employer has got obligations to meet, so they're going to make sure that they meet the obligations from Department of Home Affairs. Now, all these employer-sponsored visa, except 186 visa, which is direct entry. Like again, all these 4 visas, out of this, there's one visa which is 186 direct entry, doesn't need a sponsorship. So there are 3 applications on 407 visa, 482 visa, and 494 visa. There are 3 applications involved in all these 3 visa application. So the first one is the sponsorship application, the second one is the nomination application, the third is the visa application. These are the 3 applications involved in training visa, temporary skill shortage visa, and 494 visa. Now let's start off with the training visa. Now, as I mentioned, there are 3 applications in this process: sponsorship, nomination, and visa application. The first 2 applications, sponsorship and nomination, these are the applications from your employer to the Department of Home Affairs. So basically, we don't have any sort of information regarding yourself as a visa applicant in these 2 applications. Everything we submit to the department for sponsorship and nomination belongs to your employer or sponsor. Your part or your information comes into the visa application. That's the third application. Keep in mind that your sponsorship, nomination, and visa application are linked to each other. So for instance, like your sponsorship application got approved, but for some reason your nomination got refused, it automatically refuses your visa application. As they all are interlinked, any of the one application gets refused, it affects the other application in the queue. So sponsorship, nomination, visa, you can lodge all 3 applications at the same time as well, but you can do step by step as well. And most importantly, I would like to mention that any of the employer-sponsored visa, with my experience, I feel that the entire case or the entire application is 95% dependent on your nomination application. That's the most important application out of these three applications, nomination, which is the second application. So if your nomination has been approved, I can confidently say that there are 99.9% chances your visa application will be approved, unless you have got any health or medical conditions. So most of the cases I've seen, like nomination gets through, visa gets through easily. Rarely I have seen where the visa application got refused after the nomination is approved. So nomination is the heart of your application. That's the most important thing I wanted to mention. Now, in terms of training visa, who is it for? What are the benefits to apply for training visa? I guess training visa is important to someone who have recently completed the qualification and have applied for temporary graduate visa, or have got an experience on temporary graduate visa, and their temporary graduate visa is about to run out, and they do not want to jump onto a student visa after temporary graduate visa. They can look into this option. So you need an employer to sponsor you. So one of the most important requirements to apply for visa application under training visa is you must have minimum 1 year of work experience in the last 2 years. Full-time, so 1 year of full-time experience in the last 2 years, or you must have completed your qualification in the last 2 years, either one of them. So don't get confused, you don't need both. You must have completed either 1 year, you must have completed 1 year of work experience full-time in the last 2 years, or you must have completed your studies in the last 2 years. If you have done either of these, yes, you are eligible to apply for a training visa, as long as you have got an employer to sponsor you. Now, how does this visa help you? It allows you to work full-time in your nominated occupation, but only with the sponsor who sponsored you. So you cannot, like say, if you've been sponsored by your employer or your company, once the visa is approved, you cannot apply, you cannot work for any other employer, because this visa comes with a condition that restricts you to work with the same employer. However, if you have got a dependent or partner on this visa application, which you can include your partner or dependent in your visa application, they can work for anywhere they want to. But in terms of primary applicant, which will be you can only work with the sponsored employer. Now, one of the last important things what Department of Home Affairs wants to see, that it's like you must meet the genuine temporary entry criteria. So basically, you have to explain it to the department that, okay, well, I've got an employer to sponsor me. I want to apply for this visa, and I do not have genuine intention to stay here permanently. I'm just applying for the visa, to get some exposure in the industry or to get some more skills. And once my visa is about to finish, I'll probably leave the country. So it's pretty much similar like what we submit in student visa application, where you kind of write a GTE statement, genuine temporary entrance statement, that you do not have intention to live here permanently. That is the statement that we submit in this application as well, that you do not have genuine intention to live here permanently. It's on a temporary basis. Now, this visa is generally granted from 12 months to 24 months. So it's up to you. You can straight away apply for 24 months. But again, generally speaking, with the cases I've dealt with in the past, I usually recommend to go for 12 months, depending on your profession, depending on your occupation, depending on what basis you're applying for this visa. So say, for example, if you have already got 1 year of experience in your industry and you're applying on that basis that you need training or you need to enhance your skills in that particular field, I mean, you wouldn't be applying for 2-year training visa because you already have that experience. And in order to upskill or enhance your skill, you may need another 1 year. But if you put 2 years, that kind of risks your application. I mean, it makes your application a bit risky to get refused from the department. But again, like if you have completed your studies in the last 2 years and you want to apply for a training visa for another 2 years, that's all right. That makes sense. Actually, that can be explained in the submission, that why do you need 2 years. But as I said, it depends on the profession. It depends on the qualification, occupation you are in. So we have to look at different factors, like, what are the chances, should we go for 12 months or 24 months? So in short, as I said, this visa would be beneficial for someone who have completed their studies in the last 2 years, or if someone who have got 1 year of full-time experience in the last 2 years. This is the visa that you should be looking into, because the next visa which I'm going to discuss, which is temporary skill shortage visa, like for that you need minimum 2 years of work experience, but I'll explain it to you in the next slide, how this visa helps you to be eligible for the temporary skill shortage visa. So I hope you guys are clear on the training visa. So let's move on to the next one, which is temporary skill shortage visa. This is the most popular visa nowadays under employer-sponsored visa category, to be honest, and especially I would focus on accounting profession. With the statistics we have seen from the Department of Home Affairs, accountants were the most popular occupation in this financial year 2020 and 2021. The most popular occupation, accountant, like the highest number of occupation were accountants. They applied for employer-sponsored visa. So if you are someone who got experience for minimum 2 years, which is the minimum criteria to apply for this visa, obviously, as I mentioned earlier, do not forget that you need an employer to sponsor you under all these visa categories. So I do not have to repeat that again. I hope you understood. I'm talking about the visa applicant point of view, how you meet the eligibility criteria, but you do need the employer to sponsor you. Now, in order for you to apply for temporary skill shortage visa, you need to have minimum 2 years of full-time experience in the last 5 years. So again, that 5-year requirement is not like mandatory. It can be accepted on a case-to-case basis. Now, I just said before in the training visa that you can utilize that pathway. If you have 1 year of experience, you can apply for a training visa. And for example, if you apply for a training visa for 12 months, and assuming that you already had 1 year of experience, so you already had 1 year of experience before you applied for a training visa for another 12 months, that makes it 24 months or 2 years. Once you have that work experience, you get eligible to apply for temporary skill shortage visa, which is this visa, and it leads to permanent residency. So the training visa you initially applied, it doesn't lead to permanent residency. It just gives you the time for 12 months to 24 months. But you can utilize the training visa pathway to apply for TSS or 4A2 visa that leads to permanent residency. So 1 year on your training visa plus 1 year from your previous experience makes it 2 years, 2 years for TSS visa. It leads to permanent residency. Now, moving forward, there are certain occupations where you need a skills assessment for 4A2 visa. Now, when we talk about the occupation, most of them are the trade occupation. There are, I guess, if I'm not wrong, there are 25 occupations which require skills assessment. I would say mandatory skills assessment. I mean, if your occupation is one of those occupations, you need a skills assessment to apply for TSS visa. I think one of the general occupation I remember is project administrator. You have to have a skills assessment if you want to apply as a project administrator. Now, this TSS visa, there are two different categories again. Now, this is very important section you need to understand. Not every person who apply for temporary skills shortage visa can apply for permanent residency under employer-sponsored visa category. Depending on your occupation and which list your occupation falls under, I mean, you have to decide, like, depending what your occupation is, if it's in the long term or if it's in the short term, depending what your occupation is and which list it falls under, that decides whether you can apply for a permanent residency or not. Now, in order for you to apply for a permanent residency under employer-sponsored visa or TSS visa, your occupation must be on long-term list, which is MLT SSL list. So your occupation must be on that list. And if your occupation is there, you get a visa granted for 4 years. And after working with the employer for 3 years, you get eligible to apply for permanent residency visa, which is ENS 186 visa. So that's something I'll explain in the next slides, but I'll repeat it again. I know it could be a bit confusing. Let me rephrase it again and let me tell you this exactly, because it's really important to understand. Any TSS visa application, whether it leads to permanent residency or not, it depends which occupation and which list it falls under. So for example, let me talk about accountant. For example, if you are an accountant, it falls under long-term occupation list. You apply for 482 visa, you get a visa granted for 4 years. After 3 years working with the employer, you can apply for 186 visa, which is a permanent residency application. Now, on the contrary, let's talk about cook. For example, cook falls on the short-term list. Now, you can apply for TSS or 482 visa, but with cook, being on the short-term occupation list, you get a visa granted only for 2 years. Now, it doesn't lead to PR straight away under employer-sponsored category. You get the visa granted only for 2 years. However, you can extend it for another 2 years, but it doesn't lead to permanent residency under employer-sponsored category, being on the short-term list as what the other occupation accountant was. So I hope you're clear about this part. Why is it different for short-term occupation list? Why is it different for short-term occupation, and why is it different for long-term occupation? So short-term occupation, you can apply for the visa for 2 years plus another 2 years again, but it doesn't lead to PR. However, this is important to understand. If you applied for an occupation on the short-term list, you can always look for different options like state nomination, 190 or 491 visa categories. You may be eligible to apply in your particular state wherever you are based to apply for those visas, but not for under employer-sponsored visa, but state-nominated visa category you can always apply for. So I hope you understood the difference between the long-term occupation and short-term occupation, and how does long-term occupation leads to PR and short-term doesn't. So let's move on further, guys. The next one I have got here is, so this is what exactly I was talking about before. Occupation for medium to long term, your occupation must be on long term. The English requirement for that is you must have minimum 5 band, minimum 5 in English language ability test, like 5 in each module. And with your 482 visa, it can be renewed multiple times. Like, for example, the reason why I mentioned this, that it can be renewed multiple times, because I've had cases in the past where an applicant had an occupation on long-term list. He applied for TSS visa, but his employer did not want to sponsor him for permanent residency application. So in that case, the option for that applicant would be to reapply again for a 482 visa. Basically, they get another visa for another 4 years. Whereas when we talk about short-term, that's not possible. If you look at my third point under short-term category on the screen, it says that 2 plus 2. Obviously, you get the initial visa for 2 years, then before your visa expires, you can reapply again for the visa, but it's going to be for another 2 years, and that's it. You cannot extend that any further. And that's the reason why I said, if that's the case, you got to look yourself for other option like GSM visa category, for 190 or 491 visa. Now, the English requirement for short-term occupations is a little bit less as compared to long-term occupation. With English requirement, it's 4.5 band in each module, with overall score of 5 bands, in Aussizz. Now let's move forward. I'll be taking question. I'm pretty much sure there will be a lot of information I'm providing. You may get confused, but If any of you have any further questions, you contact any of your nearest Aussizz office or myself, who's based in Brisbane. Get in touch with our team. More than happy to assist. Now, the next one is 186 visa. Now, with 186 visa, that's the visa, that comes into the picture if you've been on 482 visa for 3 years, or if you have more than 3 years of work experience. So I'll explain that in further. So 186 visa, which we also call employer nomination scheme, has got two categories under it: direct entry stream and temporary residence transition stream. Now, the minimum requirement to apply for this visa, regardless you apply for direct entry or transition residency, temporary residence transition stream, which I'll be calling TRT stream. That's very common name to say it, TRT stream. You need minimum 6 bands in each module, and the benefit of this visa is that your employer can be anywhere. Any part of Australia. The employer can apply for this sponsorship nomination for yourself. Now, both these categories, direct entry and TRT stream, is a direct permanent residency application. Now, there's a difference why one is called direct entry and the other one is called a transition stream. Now, for direct entry, I'll probably cover up, transition first. Now, let's assume you held a 482 visa. You held a 482 visa for for example, I was talking about accountant before. You were granted a visa for 4 years. After 3 years, you get eligible to apply for permanent residency, and this is what it is: 186 TRT stream. This is the visa you're going to apply after 3 years, which is a permanent residency application. That's why it says must hold 457 or 482 visa. For those of you who doesn't know what 457 is, 482 visa, which is a current visa, used to be 457 visa, which got replaced on 18th of March 2018. So anybody who's on 457 visa, obviously there are certain exemptions for them to apply for this visa category, which we call grandfathering. But again, we have to look into case by case. I'm not going to go in detail about 457 visa as we are discussing about 482 visa. So as I mentioned before, if you have worked with your employer for 3 years, you get eligible to apply for 186 transition stream, which is a direct permanent residency application. That's for someone who has been on a 482 visa for 3 years. Now, there is another category which we discuss about direct entry. Now, what is direct entry? So direct entry is beneficial to someone who has got good experience. So when I say good experience, you need minimum 3 years of full-time work experience, plus a valid skills assessment. These are the two main requirements you need to have. So for example, talking about accountant again, if you have 3 years of full-time work experience and a valid skills assessment and an employer to sponsor you, you can directly apply for 186 direct entry, and it's a direct PR application, permanent residency application. I believe the reason why I'm repeating accountants again and again, because we have seen in the last probably year and a half, getting an invite from the state government and the Department of Home Affairs for 189 or 190 for direct PR is getting competitive. Honestly, there are not many options available for accountants, but if for someone who's got experience or been working on their student visa, on temporary graduate visa, or on their COVID visa or 408 visa as an accountant, if they have accumulated 3 years of work experience, this is the best visa you can look into if you have an employer to sponsor you. However, even if you have 2 years of experience, you can look into 482 visa, which is the previous visa I just discussed. And if you have got only 1 year of experience, you can look into 407, which was training visa. So the reason why I'm repeating accountant, as I mentioned, this is where I see that a lot of accountants struggling to achieve the permanent residency in Australia. So look into this visa category. It's very beneficial. It may lead to permanent residency, but again, if you have any question or any doubt, get in touch with our team. So I hope so far so good. It's clear in your mind what are the visa categories and what are the requirements for these visa categories. So the last one is 494. It's a skilled employer sponsored regional visa. Now, this is something, I would like to focus that you can only apply for this visa application if your employer is based in regional area. So when I say regional, obviously other than Melbourne, Sydney and Brisbane, any part of Australia is considered regional area. But if you need to be very specific, you may have to jump onto the Department of Home Affairs website and have a look at the postcode, the employer where your business is based. is it considered under regional or area or not. Now 494 visa, there used to be a visa called RSMS, which is 187 visa back in the days, which got abolished on 18th of March 2018 as well. So RSMS has been replaced by 494 visa. There have been some new requirements to apply for this visa. Similar to 186 direct entry visa, for 494 visa as well, we have this same requirements. You need minimum 3 years of full-time work experience. You need a valid skills assessment. However, this visa gives you access to more occupations which are not on long-term and short-term list. That's the most important benefit of this visa. For example, I don't know any of you who's watching this session or who have joined this session, you may all know that we had a wave or refusal, a lot of refusal from the Department of Home Affairs in late 2018 and early 2019 for retail managers. So there was an array, I can't remember how many refusals I saw around that time. Retail managers were getting refused from the Department of Home Affairs. Now, if you're any of those applicants who have been working with the same employer or any different employer, and if you've accumulated 3 years of work experience as a retail manager, now retail manager, being in an occupation, being in an ROL list, it's not in long-term or short-term list. That occupation comes under regional occupation list, which is ROL list. And if your business or employer is based in regional, you can get your skills assessment done. You can apply for this visa again. We have successfully, done more than 15 to 20 applications so far for retail managers, especially who got a refusal a couple of years back from Department of Home Affairs. Now, those are the people who can apply for 494 visa. And, if it is granted, now the requirement remains the same. It's pretty much you get a visa granted for 5 years under 494 visa. But under 494 visa, you get eligible to apply for permanent residency after 3 years. So that's the only, I would say, not a good thing about this visa, that you have to stick with the same employer for 3 years. You have to stick with the same employer for 3 years, and you get eligible to apply for permanent residency after 3 years. Now, in order for you to apply for permanent residency after 3 years, you got to show that you've been earning $53,900 per annum. And you apply for 191 visa after 3 years. So let me tell you this thing, like with 482 leading to ENS. So you need employer for ENS as well. Now with this visa 494, the different thing is that you get a visa for 5 years. After 3 years, you apply for 191 visa, where you don't need an employer to sponsor you. It's an independent one. So that's the difference between 482 leading to ENS and 494 leading to 191. With 494 leading to 191, you don't need an employer to sponsor you again for 191. It's an independent application. So I hope that explains, what's the difference between 482 and 494. As it gives 494 being in regional, it gives you access to more occupations. There are so many occupations. If you just type in ROL list from Department of Home Affairs, you will see there are a lot of occupations available there. If you have an employer in regional area to sponsor you in any of those occupations, as long as you got 3 years of work experience and a skills assessment, you are eligible to apply for 494 visa. So guys, I'm going to take questions shortly. Last thing before I start taking question, I would also like to mention about DAMA. So I'm not sure if many of you knows about DAMA or not. It's like designated area migration agreement that's been introduced by Department of Home Affairs in pretty much, I guess, seven states so far. So Northern Territory, Victoria, New South Wales, Queensland, and South Australia and Western Australia. All these states, have got this DAMA assigned to these particular state, and every state have got different requirement for DAMA. The best part of DAMA is, some of the occupations which are not even in the long-term, short-term, or ROL list, those occupations are available under DAMA category, and that leads to permanent residency as well. So depending which occupation, for example, I just want to give you a couple of occupations which you may be working in, and you don't know whether you're eligible to apply for DAMA. And again, for DAMA as well, you need an employer to sponsor you. Now, DAMA is not like in the entire state. It's talking about Queensland, for example. It's only available in far north Queensland, around Cairns area. So if you got an employer in Brisbane or say Sunshine Coast, Gold Coast, sorry, you can't apply for DAMA. Same goes for Victoria. If you've got it in Geelong or Ballarat or nearby places, it's only available around vulnerable areas. So in New South Wales, it's available, I think, if I'm not wrong, around Arana area, Arana region, DAMA is available. In Perth, in Western Australia, it's around Kalgoorlie area. So depending which state you're residing in, there are specific regions where this DAMA is assigned for. So you can look into particular occupation, and some of the occupation I wanted to discuss under DAMA, which doesn't fall under short-term, long-term, or regional list. For example, child care support worker, aged care, personal care assistant, and if you're a bar attendant, waiter, truck driver as well, and probably can't think of a few more. I mean, tour guide as well. There are a lot of occupations which doesn't fall under any of the category, but they are under DAMA list, and that leads to permanent residency. Now with DAMA as well, you get a visa granted for 5 years. You can apply for permanent residency after 3 years, and there is an exemption for age as well. And at the same time, there is an exemption for skills. Like when I say skills, work experience and qualification and English as well. Depending which region you are in, which occupation you want to apply for, we have to look into it specifically which occupation you can apply for. DAMA could be a very good option for, especially for those people who are working in agriculture or horticulture industry as well. This is something they can look into it, and they may be eligible to apply for permanent residency as per this pathway. So I hope that helps you to understand what DAMA is, because a lot of people are still not familiar with this new category DAMA, which was introduced, I think, a year and a half ago. But it hasn't been popular so far. But I guess if you're working in any of those occupations which I just mentioned before, please look into this occupation. Please look into this visa category that may help you to apply for permanent residency. So I guess that's about it for employer-sponsored visa. I'll be taking question. Last thing before I start taking question again, sorry about that, because as I said, there are so many things I can cover up, but again, due to the time limitation, we have to take questions as well. The age limit to apply for permanent residency for ENS 186 direct entry or ENS transition stream is 45-year-old. Now with TSS or 482 visa, they're you can be over 45 as well. But in order for you to apply for permanent residency application under 494 or 186 direct entry transition stream, you have to be less than 45-year-old. That's most important. But again, there are some age exemption as well, depending how much you've been earning, how long you've been working with the employer for. There are age exemptions that are applicable as well. But that, again, we have to check what sort of occupation you are in and how long you've been working with the employer for. With employer-sponsored visas, guys, I mean, honestly speaking, it's not something that I can give you general information here, obviously, which I'm trying my best to provide as much as information I can. But in terms of getting the sponsorship approved from your employer, we need to look at the profile, what sort of qualification you have, what sort of experience you have, and how does that qualification and experience fits into the business or sponsor who wants to sponsor you. So we have to kind of collectively look at all these things to make sure that your visa application or nomination application gets through and we do not get any refusal. It's one of those visa applications. I mean, this is one of employer-sponsored visa categories are one of those applications, where you do not get a chance from the department to submit more documents. So you have to be 100% accurate on the right spot right from the beginning. So if you have submitted all the documents and if you have missed out a crucial or critical information, you may not even get a chance to submit the information or provide the information, and you can expect a straight away refusal. So if you need further information or if you've got any doubt, get in touch with the person or like Aussizz office nearest to yourself. I hope that is helpful for all of you. So, and I guess I have provided pretty much most of the information which I wanted to. And,
yes.
We can start taking questions. The last slide, everybody can have a look. I have just clearly mentioned what's the difference between 482, 186, 494 visa. Obviously, I'll just leave this on in case if anybody have any questions. But, at least this slide is just to show them, what's the main difference between these two visas. I haven't included 407 training visa in this. But if you have any question, any of you have any question, please feel free to ask Anna. So Anna, over to you, please.
Thank you, Prince. That was really informative, this session. Even I got to learn a lot about employer-sponsored visa.
Right.
Okay, so there are quite a few questions. I'll start with the first question from Lillian. She's asking how many employees can be sponsored by an employer?
All right, Lillian, thank you so much for your question, Lillian. So when you say how many employees can be sponsored, there is no as such limit that how many employees an employer can sponsor, as long as the employer can justify or provide the information that it is a genuine position required in the business, and we can justify that this position is really crucial for the business. You can sponsor 2, 3, 4, 5. But again, saying that if the business turnover is not good enough, you can't go with 4 or 5 sponsors. Like, you can't sponsor 4 or 5 people, because as I mentioned before, we have to look at the company profile as well, and we need to justify why this business needs to sponsor this person, and we need to justify that business can afford the salary of the person as well. So for example, in short, if a business is already in loss, and if you go to the department that you want to sponsor this person who you'll be paying around $54,000 a year, well, that doesn't make sense to the department, because your business is already in loss. How are you going to sponsor or afford this person on your payroll? So those are the things we need to check. But in terms of your question, how many people can be sponsored in our business? Depending on the turnover, depending on the general need of the position, we need to look into it, but you can sponsor as many as you want.
Okay, the next question is, does the 1 year full-time need to be with the same employer?
Not really. It can be a combination of different employers as well. As long as you got an evidence to prove that you got 1 year of full-time employment, that'll do the job.
Deepak is asking, can an employee in Bridging Visa A or 482 visa with 5 years of experience with same employer, in the bracket he has mentioned 3 years in offshore and 2 years in onshore, can that person get 186?
186, is he talking about direct entry or transition stream? Because 186 have got 2 streams, but for 186 direct entry, as long as you got minimum 3 years of full-time work experience and a skills assessment, you can apply for 186 direct entry. But for transition stream, you have to be with the employer for minimum 3 years. So I'm not sure what your question is exactly, but I've given you both scenarios, so you can figure it out which one suits you. So for direct entry, as long as you got 3 years full-time, regardless it's offshore or onshore, all good. But for transition stream, you must be with the employer for minimum 3 years.
Okay, Deepak, you can, if you want to clarify that, you can leave that in the chat room. I'll take another question from Karthik. Hi, Prince. Does 23 months of work experience can be considered as sufficient or equivalent to 2 years for applying 482?
23 months, again, like with all these questions, I mean, it's hard for me to, because is it part-time or full-time, first of all? That's the first thing I want to know, because I can't answer yes or no in a straight away. If your experience is full-time, yes, it can be considered towards 482 visa. But if it's part-time, then it is considered as pretty much, on a pro rata basis. It would be like, I would say 1 year, 10 months or 1 year, 6 months or something around that, like roughly about that. So you have to have a full-time work experience. If it's 23 months full-time, yes, you're eligible to apply for it, because the criteria says you must have 24 months of work experience at the time of decision. It's important to understand. So say, for example, I've got 22 months of experience. My visa is running out next week, but I've got an employer to sponsor me. I put the application in, and it takes another 3 months to get to the visa application. By that time, I would have completed 24 months. It will be accepted. It's important. So yeah, I hope that helps.
Karthik has mentioned he's ICT business analyst full-time.
Now I forgot the previous question what he asked, because like full-time ICT business analyst, like, what was it, 2 years here or?
So he said, does 23 months of work experience, which is full-time, can it be considered for 2 years? Can it be considered for applying for a 482 visa?
That's right. So it's all good. But as I said, the 24 months requirement still needs to be met. But assuming that he is continuously working with the employer, the requirement of 24 months needs to be met at the time of decision of the visa application, because there is a processing time as well, which may take another 3 or 4 months. So say if you do the application today, it may take another 3 months, but if you keep working all the way through, by the time your visa application is about to be decided, you may have around 25 months of experience or 26 months of experience, which will meet the requirement.
Okay, so hopefully, Karthik, we have answered your question. The next question is from Bipin. Does 482 experience, can it be before 482 visa started? And he has another question. I don't know if it's related or not. Can it be under 407 to be counted for 482?
Pretty good question, whoever asked this question, because this is the most common question I get asked. Can I consider 407 visa work experience towards 482? Yes, you can. This is the reason why I mentioned in my previous slides. For someone who has got less experience, choose 407 visa. For someone who has got a bit of more experience, choose 482 visa. For someone who has got 3 years of experience, go for 186 direct entry. Like, this is how you look at it. So 407 visa experience can be considered for 482. However, 407 visa experience you cannot consider or include for direct entry application. So there is a bit of technical things in that. So, but in terms of your question, 482 experience will be considered from 407. That's fine.
Okay. Next question is from Rajesh. What if you have experience of 3 years on 482 on a different occupation and have skills assessment done in another occupation? Both are different. So for 186 direct entry, the skill assessment will be considered?
186 direct entry. So, okay. So sorry, who was the person who asked this question, Anna?
Rajesh.
Okay, Rajesh. Now, Rajesh, you need to be very careful in this situation, the question you've asked. First of all, let me clarify with you. You know this for a fact that the department gave you a visa for occupation A, for example. Now you went out to the ACS or any other authority, wherever you got the skill assessment for, you got the skill assessment in a different occupation. Now, it doesn't match, right? Department gave you a visa for occupation A, but you got the skill assessment from occupation B. If you try to apply for 186 direct entry on the basis of occupation B, it can create a problem because department gave you a visa for occupation A, which doesn't matches up with the occupation B. That can lead to a problem. However, if both occupations are in the same unit group, so for example, let me talk about, say, accountant. Accountant and management accountant, I guess they are falling under the same occupation group. As long as they are under the same occupation group, yes, you can apply for 186 direct entry. But in other terms, like say, for example, cook and a chef, they both are falling under a different occupation group. If you were, granted a visa as a cook for, a 482, if you were granted a visa 482 as a cook, you go out and get a skill assessment as a chef. You cannot combine that, because it's a separate occupation. These two are separate occupations and they do not fall under same unit group. So you cannot use that experience as a cook towards chef. So this is really important for you. You need to understand how it can affect your visa application, because department have got the records for the occupation they gave you the visa for. And if you're going to department again for 186 direct entry using the same experience you had on 482, that can affect your visa application, and they may impact on your current visa 482 visa as well, because obviously you're supposed to work in your occupation A, but you're showing to the department that you worked in occupation B. But in order for me to answer your question, it's better if you look into that unit group thing. If it's in the same unit group, I would advise you can go ahead. If not, seek a professional advice, please.
Okay. Next question is from Harish. What are the prerequisites for an organization to be eligible to nominate someone under 186 direct entry?
Right, Harish. Thank you for the question, Harish. So when you say prerequisite, obviously depending on the occupation. For example, let's talk about accountant again. Sorry, guys, I've been keep repeating accountant because accountant is something, there are caveats. So every employer has got, different requirements for different occupation. For accountant, it is the business turnover must be $1 million minimum, and your employer must have minimum 5 employees. It can be a combination of part-time and full-time. but your employer must need 5 employees on their payroll, and the business must have a turnover of minimum $1 million. Now, if we talk about any other occupation, we got to show that as long as the business can prove that it is a genuine position required in the business, and at the same time they can prove that the business can afford the person, like when I say affordability, the business must be in profit, and the business should be able to pay the salary of the person. Now, again, different occupation, different salary caveats as well. For example, there's an occupation called marketing specialist or marketing coordinator. For that, the salary caveat, the business must pay you minimum $65,000. So, for example, if there's a business, where the profit is only $50,000 after all the expenses, and they want to sponsor a marketing specialist where they want to pay $65,000 on top for whatever they are making, it's kind of hard for them to justify that they can afford that person, because business is only making a profit of $50,000. How are they going to afford the person to pay $65,000? So we need to look into that. So for example, moving forward in this situation, if a business wants to sponsor someone as a marketing specialist and they are happy to pay $65,000, I would recommend that they show the profit around at least $100,000 for a year. Now, again, every case is different, every business is different, we have to look into all these things, but prerequisite that business must be profitable, and there must be a genuine need in the business to prove that the business require you on a genuine basis.
Moving on to the next question. It's from Anil. Hi, I'm Chef. I have 4 years of part-time experience and 1 year of full-time experience working with the same employer. I have completed Certificate 3, currently studying Certificate 4. Am I eligible for 186? So he's a chef.
Okay, so 186, okay, in that case, so 2 year part-time and 1 year, sorry, how many years?
4 years of part-time.
2 years
and
of part-time.
1 year of full-time.
Okay, so 2 year part-time and 1 year full-time, that makes
it
Prince,
4 years.
Oh, 4 year part-time, is it?
Yeah, correct.
So 4 year part-time and 1 year full-time. So that makes it 3 years full-time experience. Now, what I need to see that this work experience, you have 3 years of work experience. Is it after the qualification or not? You mentioned that you've done Cert 3 and you're currently studying Cert 4. What previous qualification you had? We need to look at your previous qualification, and did you obtain that qualification while studying the course, or you got RPL, which is recognition to prior learning qualification? You got that qualification through RPL, or did you literally study the course? We need to look into that as well. But to be on a safer side, my suggestion, better you follow the pathway of 482 visa rather than going for 186 direct entry, because department is really strict for 186 direct entry. They consider, or they mainly focus on the work experience after you finish the qualification. After it's post-qualification experience they consider. So the 3 years of full-time work experience has to be after the qualification. Now, if you have, like say, Diploma of Hospitality or Cert 4 in Commercial Cookery prior to your experience, yes, by all means, it's all good. But if not, go with 482 visa and then follow the pathway for ENS 186 rather than going for, then follow the visa process for 186 transition stream rather than going 186 direct entry. That's my advice on that.
Okay. The next one is from Vril. Hi, I am software engineer with 3 years of experience. So can I be eligible for 482 visa? And after that, what is the pathway to get PR, whether it is 186 or not?
Right. So if you got 3 years of full-time work experience and you got an employer to sponsor you, I would recommend to look into 186 direct entry rather than going for 482 visa, because you're meeting the eligibility criteria to apply for 186 direct entry. Now, in case if you do not have full-time work experience for 3 years, you can look into 482 visa, which requires 2 years of full-time work experience. Once you get the 482 visa granted, which is 4 years, after working with the same employer for 3 years, you get eligible to apply for 186 transition stream, which is a permanent residency visa application. I hope that helps.
Thank you, Prince. Next question is from Jignesh. What is the current processing time for an registered nurse NCE for 186 direct entry for both offshore and onshore after lodging the visa application?
Right. So, Jignesh, it's very important for me to understand when you say lodging the visa application, has the nomination been approved or not? Because that's the most critical application in the entire process. So, if the nomination is approved, visa application shouldn't take that long, probably about 4 to 6 months. But if the nomination hasn't been approved, it may take a bit longer, especially for offshore application. Whereas with onshore application, it should be taking around, I would say, around 4 months for the entire process, because considering registered nurses are under critical sector, so department have prioritized all these 186 direct entry applications for 186 visa. But roughly, it would be around 4 to 6 months. Offshore application, you can expect a bit more delay, but onshore should be picked up in 4 to 6 months.
Next question is from Dinishi Silva. Hi, could you please tell me the approximate cost that the employer has to bear if they are willing to sponsor one employee? I'm working as an accountant and I am about to talk to my employer. I need to have a brief understanding of the cost.
Right, so I can give you an overview regarding the cost. In terms of your employer's expenses, obviously there are three applications: sponsorship, nomination, and visa. So visa application cost, you can bear all the expenses, but in terms of sponsorship and nomination, that cost is associated to your employer. And that includes the professional fee from a migration agent as well. So your employer should be paying for department fee for sponsorship and nomination and the professional fee for the migration agent as well. Now, I'll just talk about the employer fee to the department. Sponsorship application costs about $420. Nomination application costs about $330. Now, there is another thing that is connected to nomination application, which we call SAF, Skilling Australia Fund. Now, this is very important to understand that how much the Skilling Australia Fund, because it varies on the turnover of the business. It varies for the duration you want to apply for the visa for. So on an average, it's about $1,200 per year an employer have to pay. So for example, if your employer wants to apply for a 482 visa for 4 years, your employer has to pay $1,200 into 4, which is $4,800, which is the SAF amount that goes along with the nomination. So sponsorship $420, nomination $330 plus $4,800 for accountant occupation or 4-year visa. Now this goes higher if the business turnover is over 10 million as well. So in that case, it will be 1,800 per year. So for 4 years, obviously it will be around, I think, I don't know the calculation, but 1,800 per year into 4, you can calculate, I think it's about 7,200 something. So it will be around that much for the SAF. So depending on the turnover of the business and how long the duration you want the visa for. So for accountant, if you just want to apply for 2 years, it will be 1,200 into 2, 2,400 plus nomination and SAF. So the fee for the department sponsorship application and nomination application remains the same, but it's the SAF that varies depending on the turnover of the business and depending on the duration of the visa you want the visa for. I hope that answers your question. And for the visa application, if it's an accountant, it will be $2,400 for yourself as a visa applicant. And for migration agent professional fee, it varies from around $5,000 to $6,500 for a migration agent to do the entire process. I hope that answers your question.
Okay. Another one is from Rajesh. Hi, I am an engineer. How much time does it take to transfer 482 from existing employer to new employer? Also, can the new employer directly do the 186 direct entry if we satisfy all criteria which you shared instead of 482 transfer?
All right. By all means, you can apply for 186 direct entry, but at the same time, if you've already applied for 482 nomination transfer from one employer to the second employer, on an average, the processing time is about 3 to 6 months. But again, if your occupation is under one of the critical occupation, your employer can always send an email to the department, or your migration agent can request the Department of Home Affairs with a kind of a letter from your employer that your new employer needs your services as soon as possible due to the demand of the business. Now, obviously, because by law you cannot work for the new employer until the nomination transfer has been done or approved from the Department of Home Affairs. So you can put a request for priority. It is possible. But again, at the same time, it doesn't stop you to apply for 186 direct entry as well. As long as you're meeting the entry requirement or the criteria to apply for the visa, you can apply for 186 direct entry as well. But it's always a good idea once you get 482 nomination transferred and then you apply for 186. That's recommendable. Like, that's I would recommend, or that's not something I would advise. Get your nomination transferred first and then you apply for 186 direct entry afterwards. Do not apply two at the same time. So that's how I would, do the application. But, you can apply for both applications at the same time as well.
Okay. Next question is from Deepak. Could we apply for the 482 visa from offshore? I'm currently working from past 1 year.
By all means, Deepak, your 482 visa is not restricted to your location. You can apply for this visa if you're sitting in any part of the world, as long as you got an employer to sponsor you and the employer can justify that why does he needs you, or what special skills you have and why they want to sponsor you. If that can be proved to the Department of Home Affairs, by all means, you can apply for a visa from offshore as well.
Arif is asking, I'm a fresh graduate with no experience. I got a job with 60K package and a company is ready to sponsor me. Is sponsorship possible without work experience?
Arif, I think I'm not sure when did you join this session. In the initial slides, I mentioned about the work experience. So for you, the best application would be 407 training visa. So if you gone are the days on 457 visa, which we had it in a few years back, when you didn't have any experience, you can apply for employer sponsorship straight away. But in last couple of years, what department has changed that you need to have minimum 2 years to 3 years of full-time work experience to apply for any employer sponsored visa category, except the training visa category. So that is something you can look into. 407 visa, which is a training visa. So if you have completed your studies in the last 2 years and your employer is willing to sponsor you, you can apply for 407 visa. And, after 24 months on training visa, you get eligible to apply for 482 visa, which leads to permanent residency. I hope that helps.
Nick is asking, what if the employer doesn't have 1 million turnover? Accounting industry based in Metro New South Wales. Firm is nearly 4 years old, but does have 5 full-time employees. Can I be sponsored by them?
Unfortunately not. As I mentioned before, that there are caveats applied to particular occupations. So if you want to get a sponsorship as an accountant, your firm must have $1 million turnover. That's pretty clear from the Department of Home Affairs. Back in the days, it was possible, but since the department introduced these caveats, it is not possible. Your employer must meet these 2 minimum requirements. 1, minimum $1 million turnover, and 5 employees. So if you do not meet both of them, you cannot get a sponsorship.
I think we have already answered this question, but Ram is asking the typical processing time for 186 direct entry.
Ram, depending on your occupation, if it falls under one of the critical sectors, it may get processed in 4 to 6 months. But if it's not falling under critical sector, that may take around 8 to 12 months as well.
Priyanka is asking, I'm registered nurse, critical care and emergency. My employer lodged my 482 nomination on 25th of June 2021. Could you please answer my question? So she has written 3 questions. The first question is, can I lodge my 482 visa application now, or should I wait until the nomination is approved?
Look, there's nothing that restricts you to apply for visa application. As I mentioned in my slides before, that you can lodge all 3 applications at the same time as well, and you can go step by step as well. But your occupation being nurse, I believe that if you're working for a good employer which has got a good turnover as well, I don't see any reason that you may have any problem in your visa application. You can lodge the visa application now as well, which kind of saves you some other, which kind of saves you some money. Instead of you applying for another visa, if your visa is about to run out, you can apply for visa application, TSS visa application, and you get a bridging visa A granted, which allows you to continue working full time if your visa is about to run out.
Her second question is, how long it will take to approve the nomination?
Generally speaking, about for nurses, about 3 to 4 months, roughly about that.
Third question, what are the requirements of my offshore experience full-time for the visa? Do they ask my payslip or work experience letter from my employer?
Work reference letter from your employer, it's highly recommended. And at the same time, if you have got pay slips or tax return from overseas, that would be beneficial too. And by all means, if it is possible for you to get the APRA registration, like when you get the registration or ANMAC skills assessment, if you have got this experience mentioned on your skills assessment, that would be really beneficial, but it's not mandatory.
Deepak has another question. He said, for 186 TRT, you said 3 years of experience. Would like to check if it's on-site experience of 3 years only?
On-site experience. What does that mean, on-site experience? It has to be with the employer, so I didn't get the question on-site experience. Does he mean, I mean, you can clarify this part with him. Does he mean that working with the employer, or, I mean, when he says on-site, I mean, it can be remotely as well, as long as you're working with the same employer and getting paid.
Yeah, if Deepak, if you can just clarify this question in the chat box, and I can, oh yeah, he said Australia experience with same employer.
Yeah, that's fine. I mean, as long as he's getting paid for it, that's fine. I mean, shouldn't be a problem. Even if you are stuck overseas due to travel restriction, as long as you're getting paid, working with the employer, you got evidence to prove that you were working all the way through, and you've worked on 482 visa for 3 years, it's all good for TRT stream.
Dinishi, who was asking for the accounting one,
Yep.
she's asking if fund or investment for accountant can be considered under general accountant's position.
I'm sorry, I didn't get the question. What funds?
A fund investment accountant, can that position be considered for a general accounting position? I think that's
a particular question, occupation, and I have to check the occupation. I can't answer that straight away. I have to look into things that which occupation list that occupation falls under, and whether it will be considered for sponsorship or not, whether it is meeting the requirement or not. So I can't answer the particular occupation thing. I mean, if you have, as I mentioned, if you have what particular occupation in your mind, you may have to get in touch with us or your nearest Aussizz office.
Thank you. Next question is from Anjali. My qualification is year 12 and 1 year cookery course from India. Currently, I'm working as a chef and have 3 years of full-time onshore experience. Can I apply for 186 direct entry?
So can you repeat again the question? So she got 1 year of experience from overseas.
3 years of full-time onshore experience as a chef.
All right, so 1 year from overseas, 3 year onshore.
She did not mention if she has any 1 year experience offshore. She only mentioned she has 1 year cookery course from India.
1 year cookery course from overseas. Okay. Now, if you have 1 year of commercial cookery course from overseas, as long as you can get a skills assessment, you can apply for direct entry as a chef. It is possible, but make sure, and this is very important because the reason I'm telling you this, I have seen a lot of applicants making the mistake. If you haven't showed that qualification, what you're going to use it for your 186 direct entry application to the department before, it can be picked. So if you're saying that you've got a qualification overseas, as long as that qualification has been notified to the Department of Home Affairs, I would recommend to go for 186 direct entry. But if you haven't mentioned that qualification any time before to the Department of Home Affairs, and if you're going to go that qualification plus 3 years of experience and 186 direct entry, I can tell you right now, you are leading to a refusal, because I've seen plenty of refusals like that. And where the applicant didn't know this thing and they were not told by their migration agent, that department is looking into the previous qualification which they were advised when the person came from overseas in Australia or not. So make sure if you've advised the department before, all good. If not, look into 482 visa rather than going for direct entry. That's my recommendation.
Vaibhav has quite a long question. He said, hi, let's consider I have done my skills assessment in software engineer, and suppose my organization is going to start ENS soon. how can I ensure my nomination is done in same job code? Can you please explain some more details? How does that sponsorship work done by employer? What details employers submit to Home Affairs to get approval of sponsorship? And what letter I need to get before starting with the actual visa process? Also agency cost for processing it for 186.
Right, so I can see it's a bit long question. First of all, let me understand the question. I have done my skills assessment in software engineer code, and suppose my organization is going to start ENS soon. Okay, how can I ensure my nomination is done in the same job code? So when you say that, how can I ensure my nomination is done in the same job code? Obviously, your organization first of all need to justify, like you got the skills assessment done as a software engineer, so your organization needs to justify this, that they genuinely need a software engineer. They need to show that how a software engineer in the organization can contribute to the growth of the business or the company. Now, in order for to do that, the employer need to advertise a position as well. So that's what we call a labor market testing. So labor market testing is required before they get you on board. So they place an advertisement for minimum 28 days where they let other Australian citizens or permanent residents to apply for that position. They go through the interview round or XYZ, and if they do not find a relevant person that fits into that particular job or position, they can take you on board, because all these things we need to justify to the department that, when we launch the application, we got to justify to the department that the Australian business, over here, they wanted to give an opportunity to Australian citizen or permanent resident first before they reached out someone who's an overseas worker to sponsor in their company. So that's the most important part. A labor market testing is required as well. Now, can you please explain some more details? How does the sponsorship work done by the employer? What details employers submit to Home Affairs to get approval for sponsorship? Okay, so details they have to provide, that they have been actively operating in Australia. So profit and loss statement for the business, business activity statement for the business, lease agreement for the business, bank statement of the business, ABN and ASIC record for the business. And they need to provide a submission that they need you on a genuine basis in the business, and how your position will contribute towards the growth of the business. And in terms of you getting the visa lodgement process, you need to provide that you've got minimum 3 years of full-time work experience. You need to provide the evidence for that, along with your skills assessment as well, valid skills assessment. Now, in terms of cost, it varies. Like for a single applicant, including the migration agent cost and the department cost, it could vary somewhere between 10 to 13 grand. So $10,000 to $12,000 to $13,000, depending on the turnover of the business, depending on what occupation it is. And there are a few factors that we need to consider, but it will be around $10,000 to $12,000 for ENS. I hope that explains the question.
Next question is from RP. Do I need positive skill assessment as electrician or electrical engineering technician to apply for 482 TSS visa? Am I eligible to apply for electrician license if I have 3 years of overseas experience as an electrician?
Now, Ati, if you have got 3 years of overseas experience as an electrician is one of the, I would say, licensed trade in Australia. So I believe that you have to get a skill assessment done from TRA, Trade Recognition Australia, to apply for a temporary skill shortage visa. So first of all, that's the first process you need to look into, how to get the skills assessment, because it's a licensed occupation and you need to get the skills assessment. And once you have the skills assessment, yes, there are possibilities, but I don't know how do you relate that electrician thing with electrical engineer, because we need to look at your qualification as well, what qualification you have done. If you have done Bachelor of Electrical Engineer, you can't apply for electrician, because different occupation have got different qualification requirements, and different occupation have got different assessing body for your skills assessment. So these are the things which obviously we cannot cover up in the session like this. We have to sit down face to face and understand what exactly the case is, so we can go through your profile and understand, okay, what the business, what sort of business, how the business operates, what sort of operation they do, and at the same time what your qualification is, what your experience is, and we have to collectively look at all these three scenarios and find out whether we can do the sponsorship application or not.
There's another question from Deepak. He was asking earlier about 482 visa from offshore. He's saying, hi Prince, thanks for answering my earlier question regarding application from offshore. I'm an MBA graduate and I'm planning to apply on the occupation conference and event organizer. I have 2 years of experience. I was able to work from offshore and still doing. My employer is happy to sponsor me. What are my chances? The above occupation falls under 2 short-term category with 2 years of experience in 482. Can I again apply for 494? My company is located in Gold Coast.
Yes, for sure. If you already have experience, 2 years of work experience, you can apply for sure, like, temporary skill shortage visa, 482 visa for 2 years. And once you come on TSS visa, obviously after 1 year, you will accumulate 3 years of work experience and you can apply for 494 visa afterwards. So it's all good, no issues with that.
We only have a few more questions left now, Prince. William is asking, what is the requirement for an employer to nominate? Do they need already have a number of Australian?
Right, William. Look, there's no specific definition from the department that how many Australian employee you need in your business. However, businesses with more Australians on their payroll are, considered in a well manner, I would say, because the chances of getting approval from the department is higher because it shows that the business is supporting Australian jobs by recruiting more Australians on the board. But if a business has got, like, say, less Australian people working for the business and more overseas workers, that's kind of creates a question mark, like, whether this business is supporting the Australian employment or not. Now, considering the way it is going at the moment, unemployment rate is increasing. So Department of Home Affairs definitely look into these factors, that whether this business is creating the employment in Australian workforce or not. And they do consider these factors. So the more Australians they have on board, the better it is for nomination application. If not, still it can be done. But again, as long as we can justify it's a genuine position for the business, it should be all good.
I think we have the last question here. Sobik, hi, I have applied 189 from offshore India as a single having 90 points, cartographer under PMSOL. I have 6 years of work experience in the same field, but different application like environment, IT, and defense. I apply for jobs from India, but it's rejected due to work rights. His first question is how to get employer sponsor from offshore. As Aussizz Group is an international agency, can the agency help me to get through any interview? Or is there any other way to do it?
Right. Thank you for your question. And it's pretty good that you got an invitation for 189 and you've already applied for 189. So that's a pretty good thing. While you're waiting, in terms of finding an employer, obviously we are a migration and education agency. We are not a recruitment agency. But what I can recommend you personally is to get in touch with the recruitment agencies, do some Google search, and find out what are the recruitment agencies in Australia that, kind of helps the companies out here to find the talent or, people with good skills. So try to find those recruitment agencies who really specializes in your particular field. Send them an email, send them your resume, mention that, obviously, this is what the scenario is. I'm waiting for the permanent residency application to be granted from Department of Home Affairs. And, these are the things which I have got. Share your resume, mention the skills which are really in shortage in Australia, which kind of stands out your resume as compared to the other resume they have on board. So that would be my recommendation. Get in touch with the recruitment agencies. If you try to apply with, if you want to apply directly with the companies, obviously they may not entertain you because you being not here in Australia at the moment, and they may not entertain you. But if you get in touch with recruitment agencies, because these are the agencies who are connected with multiple or thousands of employers out there, who they these employers do not mind to sponsor you even if you're overseas. So the best bet would be to get in touch with the recruitment agencies. That's the right way to go rather than reaching out to the company directly.
he's clarifying he has not got any invitation yet. He has applied for jobs. He will apply for jobs if he gets 186 invitation, but work right is the constraint.
So, I mean, 186 invitation, I mean, that's something I didn't get it, Sobik. There's no thing as such called invitation in 186 because you're talking about 189 or 186, there's no invitation. But if you're talking about 186 employer, as I said, we do not assist to find the employer. You have to do this research on your own. But the only thing I can advise to get in touch with the recruitment agencies, share your resume if possible, have a phone conversation or a Zoom meeting with the person who looks after the recruitment from the particular recruitment agency. Mention about your skills and see if that helps you or not.
One more question has popped up. It's from Bipin. Does getting 407 and 482 visa allow to work for multiple employer or just the employer that sponsors him?
Right. So until your visa is granted, what it means that if you're holding a bridging visa A, you can work with multiple employers, but the day it is granted, either 407 or 482, you cannot work with any other employer because it works with the it comes with a work condition 8107 or 8105 that allows you to only work with the same employer. You cannot work for any other employer.
Okay. That's all the questions we have got for today. Thank you very, very much, Prince, for the informative session and answering all the questions. And I would also like to thank all the guests for attending the session. We would like to request you to please leave a review for our session, just so that we can improve these kind of sessions for in future, which could be beneficial for you. Not only people who are onshore, people who are offshore as well can join this session at the convenience of their, like they can just stay at their home and join it anywhere they are. They can join this session. So it will be great if you can just leave a review. I have just shared the link in the chat room. Also, don't miss out our next info sessions that are going to happen. The next sessions are for PTE, CCL, and the last Q&A session for the day. So if your questions, I see some more questions are still popping up, but we won't be able to take it during this session. You can join the Q&A and immigration update session at 5:30 p.m. to 6:30 p.m. I've left the link in the chat room as well for that. And we have got PTE and CCL session that's happening at 4 o'clock to 5 o'clock. And I have shared the link for that as well in the chat box just now. Also, I would like to let you know this session was recorded. So the recording of the session will be available on our YouTube page. So please subscribe and hit the notification bell button to be notified when the video gets uploaded. I will share our YouTube page link in the chat box as well. And that's all from me. Prince, do you have anything else to share with the audience?
No, that's about it. I guess we had a good session. Thank you so much, everybody who joined this session. I hope you got a lot of information from this session. And as I mentioned, like with employer-sponsored visas, you have to be very careful if you want to apply for this particular visa application because it's not cheap to apply, to be honest. There are a lot of factors we need to consider. So do seek a professional advice with your migration agent, or if you want to connect with Aussizz Group, you can connect with any of our offices. We are pretty much based in all the major cities of Australia, and we have got highly experienced migration agents who work on employer-sponsored visa. Myself was based in Brisbane. Feel free to get in touch face-to-face if you're in Brisbane. I know we're all going through a tough time, and Queensland, we got announced this lockdown yesterday, which is not a good thing. I think it's pretty much same in Perth and Sydney as well. So wherever you are, guys, just stay safe. Follow the protocols. That COVID protocols. What's being given by Australian government, and I hope things will get better soon. And I wish you guys all the best. Hope you get your permanent residency soon. And thanks so much for watching and joining the session today. Thanks once again.
Thank you, everyone. Bye-bye.